Good evening. God rules supremely. God is sovereign over all things. Our God sits in the heavens and He does whatsoever He pleases. So how come tens of thousands of people lost their homes because a cyclone hit Mozambique? How come? Our dear brother Shannon's in a wheelchair. How come millions of people are starving right now? If our God is in the heavens and He does whatsoever He pleases, those are somewhat problematic issues. I'm sure that when the series God is Nowhere, God is Now Here, when it was announced and people were told it was going to be a series of people and books in the Bible in which it seemed as though God was absent, I would have thought that one of the books that would be coming to mind to people would be the book of Job. And I'd like us to look at the book of Job. I titled my message, Job in 30 Minutes and 5 Statements. And then I asked Trevor if I could come back a second time, and I've changed it to Job in 60 minutes and 5 statements. But I'd like us to look at the book of Job. What we're going to do today is look at the first 2 chapters, and God willing, if I am allowed to return, and if Jesus doesn't come before I'm scheduled to return, which would be fine with me, we'll look at the other 40 chapters afterwards. We're all aware, I'm sure, that the first 2 chapters in the book of Job set the stage for the whole of the rest of the book. The book of Job helps us to answer questions like, why did Idai cause so much suffering if God is in control? Why do good things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? And if we didn't have the first 2 chapters in the book of Job, we would find the book of Job the most depressing book in the whole Bible. It would be a book with a problem and no solution, darkness and no light, suffering and no hope, questions and no answers. Thank God for the first 2 chapters in the book of Job. I'd like us this evening to extract 2 principles from these 2 chapters, and we're going to do that after we look through basically what took place. We won't be able to do it in great detail, but I probably am just going to remind you what took place in these first 2 chapters. And primarily, these are records of very important events on earth and even more important events in heaven. So let's have a look at the book. Do have your Bibles open? I won't look at every verse by any means, but verses 1 to 5 of the book of Job introduce one of God's great followers. In verse 1, we have a statement of Job's godliness. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless, upright, fearing God, and turning away from evil. So here's a man against whom nobody could make any accusation. He had a relationship with God, and that relationship with God made him turn away constantly from evil. His life was always oriented away from evil towards godliness. And as a result of that, God blessed him hugely. And again, I'll read these verses. Verse 2, 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. His possessions also were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. And that man was the greatest of all the men of the East, fairly prominent man. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. So there's a description of Job and how blessed he is. He was the greatest of all of the men of the East. Verse 5 returns to Job's godliness. When the days of feasting were completed, Job would send and consecrate them, that's his children, rising up early in the morning and offering burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, perhaps my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. So here's a man, if ever there was a man who lived, who deserved the blessings of God. Those of you who know Psalm 1 is that psalm which talks about the blessed man who doesn't walk in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. In his law he meditates day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by rivers of living water that brings forth its fruit in its season. His leaf does not wither, and whatsoever he does, he prospers. That's Job. That's a perfect example. So it's a perfect description of Job. Job is the Psalm 1 man. Job is that man who is completely dedicated to God and wonderfully blessed by God. And then the attention moves from the scene on earth to what's happening in heaven. And obviously we don't know exactly how these things happen and whether in actual fact God does hold court, as it were, but the Lord is trying to communicate to us events that took place and conversations that took place. Verse 6, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Notice what the Lord did. He initiated and said to Satan, "Where do you come from?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From roaming about on the earth and walking around on it." The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But put forth your hand now and touch all that he has. He will surely curse you to your face." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not put forth your hand against him." So Satan departed from the presence of the Lord. Satan's accusation to God about Job is basically this: God, you are not worth following purely on the basis of who you are. You are only worth following on the basis of what you do. And because you have done good things to Job, that is why Job follows you. And that's a key issue here in the book of Job, friends. Is God worth following even if he provides nothing good for us? Is my faith in God based upon the worthiness of God's character or the blessings of his bounty? That's what Satan is challenging. Well, God gives Satan permission. We know what happens. I won't read these, but from verse 13 down to verse 19, everything that Job had that was described in the first verses 2 to 4, everything that Job had was one by one taken away from him. The 5 blessings in verses 2 to 4, oxen, donkeys, sheep, camels, and children, are removed in 13 to 19, all in the same day. So Job woke up in the morning, and he was a wealthy man and a happy father. And that night, he was a destitute man, and he had no children. Well, we know what happens in chapter 2. There's a similar scene in heaven. Satan goes back, presents himself before the Lord. Again, please notice, verse 2, the Lord, Jehovah, initiates the conversation. Where have you come from? Same answer, roaming about on the earth. Same question from the Lord back, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on the earth, a blameless, upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil. That's what was said about Job in verse 1. And then God adds this, and he still holds fast his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without cause. Job is still following me, taking away all my gifts, and he still follows me. What do you think about that, Satan? Ha! Skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he'll give for his life. However, put forth your hand and touch his bone and his flesh. He will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your power, only spare his life. Satan's argument here is, yeah, but he's still got his health. And God says, you can take his health. You just can't take his life. And Satan departs. And what is it? What's the result on poor old Job? Verse 7 and 8. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his feet. Boils all over. So painful that he took a piece of pottery to scrape himself while he was sitting amongst the ashes. Remember, we read that Job was the greatest of all of the men of the East. And now he's a wretched man sitting amongst the ashes, full of boils, scraping himself with a piece of pottery. His wife comes to him, and we're very quick to criticize his wife, but I think his wife represents us. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." There's a very profound philosophical issue here. If God turns out not to be good, if God turns out not to be good, then life is hopeless. If God turns out not to be good, then life is hopeless. And that is one of the issues we face as human beings. We live in a world in which there's a great deal of evidence of evil and wickedness and sadness and grief. And if the God who is God is not a good God, then life is hopeless, despair is inevitable, death is relief. And the wife, in a sense, is like us. If I don't see evidences of God's goodness, therefore, God is not so easy, friends. If I don't see evidences of his goodness, therefore God is not good. That's what the wife was saying. And I think sometimes she represents us. We sometimes think God is only good when I can see evidences of his goodness. And so I feel a certain amount of sympathy for this woman. She was very honest. If God is not good, curse God, die. The best thing that can happen to you is death, if God is not good. And Job's response is absolutely wonderful. Verse 10, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God and not adversity?" The character of God is such that whether or not he sends good things or bad things, he is still worthy. He is still worthy. Job maintained his faith in the goodness of God in the face of clear, empirical evidence that such goodness probably did not exist. Can I say that again? Job maintained his faith in the goodness of God in the face of clear, empirical, i.e., you can test it, you can see it, it's verifiable evidence that such goodness probably did not exist. The reality on the ground mocked the claims of faith. Faith might say God is good. Reality around says, no, he's not. No, he's not. Look at Job. Now, I'd like to pull out two principles from these two chapters. You're awfully quiet. It's worrying. And then, God willing, if Trevor invites me back, the last three next time. Principle number one is this. There are things that happen in heaven that we cannot be fully aware of. There are things that happen in heaven that we cannot be fully aware of. Everything that takes place in heaven is unknown to Job, but not to us. It's very interesting. The hero of the story doesn't know, but the spectators to the story, we know. God made sure that the writer of the book put these opening chapters in. We are privy to information that Job was ignorant of. Now that whole scene in heaven, those two scenes in heaven, Satan the sons of God presenting themselves, Satan being present, it all seems somewhat bizarre. And as I mentioned before, obviously God has put this all these actions into a way that we can understand as humans. But there are some elements in this bizarre situation that I think it's important for us to grasp. Number one, the affairs on earth are of interest to heaven. The affairs of earth are of interest in heaven. The discussion in the heavenly scene all relates to what's going on earth. Earthly events engage heavenly interest. And not just engage interest, but they are obviously really important. And they're important to each one of the main characters. They're important to God, Jehovah, and they're important to Satan. Satan has been roaming around on the earth, walking around on it. Obviously, for Satan, the earth is an important place, and what happens there is important. And it's obviously important to Jehovah as well, because he points to a man on earth, and he says, "Have you considered my servant Job?" So, not only are the affairs of earth of interest in heaven, they are obviously also important in heaven. That's the first principle. Principle number two, God finds pleasure, satisfaction, joy in the faithfulness of his people. God finds pleasure, satisfaction, joy, pride in the faithfulness of his people. There's almost a sense of boasting for God as he speaks to Satan about Job. Have you considered Job? A blameless and upright man. God almost boasts about Job. What happens on the earth is relevant. In this contest between Satan and God, God finds extreme pleasure and joy and satisfaction and pride in the faithfulness of Job. Satan finds it to be just doesn't like it. And so what Job acts out in his life has importance to both God, the good God, and Satan, the evil Satan. These issues on earth affect the struggle between God and Satan in heaven. Third principle I'd like us to notice is that Satan's power is limited under God's authority. There's no yin-yang balance of good and evil in the universe. That's a load of junk. I'm a Star Wars fan, but there's no dark side of the Force and light side of the Force. That's a load of junk. There is one supreme God and one subservient Satan. And that's very, very reassuring, isn't it? It's very reassuring that Satan can only do what God allows him to do. That is reassuring. But it's confusing? God allows Satan to do some of the things that God allows Satan to do. That's confusing. So yes, we're reassured. Satan will only do what God allows him to do. But what's confusing is God saying, I'm going to allow you to do things that are horrible. Particularly in the life of Job. But I think Job was not just given just Job. Job was given for us to think much more widely. God actually allows Satan to do some pretty nasty things. That's principle number 3. And principle number 4 follows on from that. Sorry, it's almost a repetition. What God allows sometimes are evil things. Now, of course, we hold to, and I believe it's absolutely biblical, God cannot do